Distinguished colleagues, the prayers are well engrafted and well spelled out here, and I seek your leave to lay this important petition.
Please go ahead. Honorable Dennis.
Thank you. Ian Zazal, PhD. Mr. Speaker, my name is Honorable Dennis Nnamdi Abu. I represent the highly enterprising people of Ibuezeno today in the Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, I'm from Enugu State. Mr. Speaker, I have a petition from my constituents in the name of Obola for Youth Advocates. They are petitioning this House against the harassment, terrorism, extortion by a team of Nigerian police people led by a certain ASP, Dumbiri. This petition is on extrajudicial killing, illegal policing, and brutalization by the Nigerian police led by ASP Dumbiri and his team from Osuka Area Command. Mr. Speaker, the prayers of these youth who we have just prevailed on them to keep the peace, to maintain the peace, and rather come through this house of the Nigerian people. They are signed by 20 of them, and their prayers are well spelled out in the body of the prayers. With your kind permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to approach the chair and lay the petition.
Please go ahead. Any more petitions? Yes, Honorable Ifeanyi.
One Godwin Nnamdi Uguala for unlawful eviction from their house and the withholding of the money paid to him and the continuous threatening and harassment. The clause of their petition is well spelled out, and I wouldn't want to waste the time of the House. I seek the leave of the House to lay the petition, Your Excellency.
Please go ahead, sir. Honorable Ikenga.
The good people of Idaho North, Idaho South Federal Constituency, and from Imo State. Mr. Speaker, I have a petition from a group of 14 police officers who are one is from my constituent. Petition is against their unlawful retirement from Nigerian Police Force and refusal by the Police Service Commission to reinstate them despite a substituting court judgment, and seeking the help of this House to help solve it. And secondly, is a petition from Caroline Onyaganam, who is seeking the intervention of the House in a matter concerning brutal assault, criminal conspiracy, denial of fundamental human rights, as well as a move to demolish her family house situated at Waro, Apo District FCT, and a call for the House to help resolve the issue. This offensive is being carried by one Musa Todo and Elia Bulus. With your kind permission, Mr. Speaker, I want to proceed to lay the petition.
Please go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I'm from Benin City, Edo State, the heartbeat of the nation. Mr. Speaker, I have a petition here from the indigenous people of Ugbawa community, Benin City, against the management of the University of Benin Teaching Hospital, particularly Mrs. Christabel Itoan Osawaro Loku, and the management staff of Federal Ministry of Land, Housing, and Urban Development, Benin Zone. This petition is for the illegal conversion, fraudulent sale of our federal government acquired land at Ugbawa, Benin City, the criminal misappropriation of the proceeds running into hundreds of millions of naira, official corruption and abuse of office. Mr. Speaker, this petition is signed by Pa Andrew Ifaluyu Ekwe, Chief Osaminge Ero, Elder Benjamin Yari, and Honorable Osaimore Ojo. Mr. Speaker, with your leave and the leave of the House, I would like to step forward to lay this petition.
Please go ahead, Honorable Ledu. Oh, is it Matthew? No, Edu. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am Honorable Engineer Idu Emeka G. I represent Onitsha North and Onitsha South Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, I am from Anambra State. I have a petition from one of my constituents, Chief Ifeanyi Ilo. This petition is duly signed by his legal practitioner, FAR Obi Okafo. And the petition is on illegal and fraudulent auctioning of Toyota Highlander with chassis number JTEDP Ifeanyi Ilo by the Nigerian Customs Service, Tinkan Command. Mr. Speaker, with a leave and leave of the House, may I lay the petition?
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Ambarura.
Mr. Speaker, my respected colleagues, I'm Honorable Bello Isa Ambarura. I'm representing the people of Godaba and Elela Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, I'm from Sokoto State. Mr. Speaker, my respected colleagues, I have a petition from one Sergeant Abubakar for a wrongful dismissal from service. In that respect, he has written to the Committee of House on Public Petition in order to do something for this injustice and unfair termination of service, or from service. Mr. Speaker, with the League of the House and the members of this Honorable House, I would like to raise the petition on behalf of Sergeant Abubakar Idris. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Please go ahead. Any more petitions? Honorable Fatoba.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker, presenting this petition. May I seek for your kind permission?
Petitions? Honorable, okay? Yeah, are you okay for today? On public petitions for further legislative action. Honorable Jajere, thereby directed to rise and move his motion.
Name is Engineer Mohammed Buba Jajere. I represent the good people of Fika Fune Federal Constituency. I am from Yobe State. I have a matter here of urgent public importance on the urgent need to provide security following armed robbery attack at Ngalda Market, Fika local government area of Yobe State. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Any seconder to the first leg? Can't see the...
Ngalda people are known to be peace-loving people and do go about their daily activities, including trading without any form of intimidation and violence of any part. Further note that on the 20th day of January, a group of unknown armed robbers attacked Ngalda Market in Fika local government area and carted away goods and cash worth millions of naira. Worried that the armed men in the process of this despicable act, 17 lives were lost, while several others sustained varying degree of life-threatening injuries. Disturbed that this attack is one of so many being perpetrated, not only in Yobe State, but the country at large, while the perpetrators of these heinous acts sometimes go scot-free. Concerned that while our security agencies are doing their best, more needs to be done to rid our dear nation of these criminal elements living in our midst. The House therefore resolves to direct relevant government agencies such as Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, National Emergency Management Agency, Northeast Development Commission, the Small and Medium Scale Enterprise Development Agency, SMEDAN, and the Nigeria Police and other military outfits through appropriate committees of the House to 1, provide financial assistance and relief materials to traders and families of the deceased affected by the attack. 2, offer free medical assistance and support to the victims. 3, provide adequate protection and security measures for the market and its environs. And 4, investigate the incident thoroughly and bring the perpetrators to justice. I so move, Mr. Speaker. Thank you so much.
Importance with the topic of a call for immediate improvement of operations at the Absan and Garaku toll gates in Nasarawa State. I move that it's urgent and our rules be suspended to enable me to take this motion. I so move.
Any seconder to the first leg of the motion? Honorable Tafoki.
Right Honorable Speaker, sir, very distinguished colleagues, I remain Honorable Engineer Shehu Alhatu Tafoki. I represent Pascali.
The House notes that the House eulogizes the initiative of the toll operations by the federal government on the Abuja-Akwanga Lafia-Makurdi Road corridor to repay the $460.8 million loan obtained from the China Exim Bank for the road's rehabilitation and upgrade, which was officially launched on Tuesday, 4th February 2025. The House also notes that these toll gates are intended to generate revenue for road maintenance, just as we have in other areas of the world and parts of Nigeria like the airports, the Lekki toll gates. Also, payment options usually include electronic methods and cash options. In some cases, payments can be made in advance, and a sticker placed on your car for electronic payments which make movement seamless for the commuters. The House is worried that the toll operations on the Abuja-Akwanga axis have instead become a major source of hardship and frustration for Nigerians, as current operational modalities for running them have resulted in severe traffic congestion, turning what should be a relatively short journey into an agonizing ordeal. For instance, a journey from Lafia to Abuja, which previously took approximately 2 hours 30 minutes, now stretches to an unbearable 5 hours or more. Aware that this dramatic increase in travel time has significantly negatively impacted on commuters, on businesses, and the overall economy. It causes delays in delivery of goods and services, increases fuel consumption, and leads to loss of productivity. More importantly, it inflicts immense stress and hardship on individuals, families, and businesses. This even led to a scenario where a woman delivered a child on the road during one of these traffic incidences due to no movement of traffic. The House is also aware that a good portion of the road has not been completed, and these areas of construction are constituting a death trap, as a lot of my constituents have lost their lives in crossing the road due to the non-organized nature of traffic because of the construction work. The House is concerned that the situation is rapidly deteriorating, and if left unchecked, has the potential to escalate into a chaotic and anarchic situation. We cannot afford to ignore this pressing issue. The House is also concerned that this is about the only road that tolls are being collected in the country as of now, which is against the principle of federal character. All collections of roads should start at the same time. The House therefore resolves to call on the federal government to improve the operational framework of the Garaku-Abson toll gates immediately, mandate the relevant committees of the House to investigate the contract concerning the toll gates, the operations of these toll gates. This investigation should include, but not limited to, the reasons for the persistent traffic congestion, the feasibility of alternative traffic management systems, and uniformity of toll collections all over the world. And lastly, urge the relevant government agencies to explore immediate alternative solutions to alleviate traffic congestion in the short term at all toll gates by considering as an interim measure, emphasis, a manual cash collection system to replace the current electronic tax collection system, just as is done at the Nnamdi International Airport, till a more lasting and efficient solution is found. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Any seconder? Honorable Umaru.
Peter Anekwe. I represent the good people of Anambra East and West. I'm from Anambra State. Mr. Speaker, rise this morning under Arrow 5 to enable me to take this motion of urgent importance. Motion on the need to critically wade into the ongoing crisis between the Ebago Aguleri and Umuoji Umuobanam. I so submit, Mr. Speaker.
Any seconder to the first leg of the motion? Can you see the face properly? Yes, please.
Ms. Honorable Peter Anekwe. I represent the good people of Anambra East and West. I'm from Anambra State. The House knows that Ebago Aguleri and Umuoji Umuobanam community in Anambra East and West Federal constituency of Anambra State are currently immersed in a brutal land dispute for over 2 weeks now. Also note that the ongoing crisis has escalated to other communities in Aguleri and Anam, leaving many dead, many people injured, and so many others displaced. Concerned that the right of life, dignity of human person, personal liberty, and right to movement constitute imperative aspect of the fundamental human rights, as enshrined in 99 Constitution of the Federal Government, Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. Regret that if the ongoing crisis is not urgently managed, it will continue to pose a negative to the fundamental human rights herein itemized, with destruction of more life and property as its devastating result. That the ongoing House resolved to urge the security agencies to forestall further brutality and restore peace and tranquility in the cited communities. Also urge the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction through the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, to swiftly provide requisite humanitarian assistance to victims and manage the ongoing crisis. To mandate the House Committee on Emergency and Management Agency and legislative compliance to ensure the manifestation of the resolved hearing. To observe a minute silence for those who lost their life in the process of this crisis. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Is Honorable Moses Oluwatoyin Fainkam, member representing Mushin True Federal Constituency of Lagos. Just to put a record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, I should give the report to you. Okay.
Since the man from Ikorodu is around, we thought they are trapped in...
Mr. Speaker, my esteemed colleagues, I am Honorable Bello Issa Ambarura, representing Gwarabawa Ilela Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, I'm from Sokoto State. Mr. Speaker, I rise up to submit a report on the Conference Committee on a bill for an act to prohibit the exportation of maize or its derivatives in large commercial quantities out of Nigeria and for related matters. Mr. Speaker, I would like to crave the indulgence of the House to lay the report for further legislative actions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any seconder? Rashid.
Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, my name is Bamidele Salam. I represent the North and the South Egbedore Ejigbo Federal Constituency of Osun State. Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning to move that the bill for an act to repeal the National Lottery Act number 7 of 2005 and the National Lottery Amendment Act number 6 of 2017 and to enact the Central Gaming Bill to regulate the operation and business of all forms of online and remote gaming across the geographical boundaries of the federating unit and beyond the borders of Nigeria, provide for the conduct of gaming in the Federal Capital Territory and enhanced revenue generation for the Federation and for related matters, be read for the second time. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Any seconder? The leader has concluded the business of the day.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Sit where you are, don't get up. Mr. Speaker, I'm Professor Julius Iyonvere Owen, Owan Federal Constituency, Edo State. I rise to move that a bill for an act to amend the Agricultural Research Council of Nigeria Act, Cap A12, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria of 2004, as amended, to make provision for the establishment of Federal College of Agricultural and Animal Husbandry, Talase, Gombe State, and for related matters, SB 297, be read a second time. This is a Senate bill.
Okay. The minority leader, please can you second?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion as very well moved by the House leader. I so second.
Those in support of this motion should say aye.
Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, my name is Honorable Abdul Mumin Jibrin. I represent Iru Bebeji Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, I'm from Kano State. Mr. Speaker, with the leave of Mr. Speaker, at the House, with the leave of the House, I rise to move for a bill for an act to establish the Kofa Bebeji Entrepreneurs University, Kano State, to provide for full-time courses, teaching, instructions, and training in technology, applied science, art and social sciences, humanities and management, and for related matters. I here move for this bill to be read for the second time, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Hassan Hussein, let it be. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. This is Honorable
Dr. Tajuddin Abbas, GCON. My honorable colleagues, I rise this morning to move that a bill for an act to establish lower court, designated district and magistrate courts for the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, with jurisdiction over civil and criminal causes and matters, and for the appointment of district court judges and magistrates and of other court officers and for other purposes relating to or connected with the administration of civil and criminal justice, and for related matters, HB 1947, be read the second time. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Bello Isa Ambarura, I'm representing the people of Gwadabawa and Elela Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, I am from Sokoto State. Mr. Speaker, my esteemed colleagues, I rise up to present a motion on a rescission of clause 14 subsection 2 B, C, and D of the Southwest Development Commission Bill 2025. Pursuant to Order 9, Rule 1, subsection 6 of the Standing Orders of the House of Representatives. Mr. Speaker, the House may wish to know that the Southwest Development Commission Bill Establishment HB 283/2024 was passed by the National Assembly. Aware of the need to rescind the provisions of Clause 14, subsection 2, B, C, and D of the bill to be in tandem with the similar federal government bodies. Cognizance of the need to incorporate the new changes into the bill. Resolve, resign its decision on the clause 14 to section B, C, and D of the bill and recommit same to the Committee of the Whole for consideration. Mr. Speaker, my distinguished list, I so submit. Thank you.
I represent Ikeja Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion ably moved by the Chairman of Business and Rules. I so second.
Those in support of Honorable Namchi is hereby invited to move the motion. Honorable Paul.
The lead, Professor Namchi, is talking this motion on the alleged fraudulent practices in the payment of contractors by the Office of the Federal Ministry of Finance and Office of the Accountant General of the Federation. On this with me is Professor Paul Namchi and Honorable Aminu Sani Jaji. The House knows that the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as amended, mandates transparency, accountability, and prudent management of public funds as fundamental principles of governance. Also knows that Section 15, sub 5 of the Constitution provides that, quote, the state shall abolish all corrupt practices and abuse of power, unquote, which underscores the government's obligation to prevent, investigate, and punish malfeasance practices, particularly in public finance management. Observes there are reports of contractors being coerced into offering kickbacks or facing unjustified deductions from their payments as a condition for processing their invoices by officials of the Federal Ministry of Finance. Alarmed that corrupt practices in contractor payments lead to abandonment of critical infrastructure projects, loss of jobs, and economic hardship, contrary to the objectives of the present administration's economic recovery efforts, worried that the unrestrained continuation of these practices discourages credible investors and undermines faith in the government's ability to uphold transparency and accountability. Also worried that if these allegations are not thoroughly investigated and addressed, contractors will lose confidence in the government's engagements, leading to slowed economic development and failed infrastructure projects nationwide. Appreciates that this situation demands an urgent and decisive response in line with Section 88, sub 1 and 2,
that empowers the National Assembly to investigate any matter related to the administration of laws within its legislative competence and conduct any official or department responsible for public revenue and expenditure. Resolves to 1, urge the federal government to A, strengthen internal controls and enforce strict penalties for officials found culpable in corrupt practices within the payment system, and B, establish a transparent and accountable digital payment system to eliminate discretionary human interference in contract payments, ensure timely disbursement and compliance with due process, and 2, mandate the committees on finance to investigate the allegations of fraudulent practices in the payment of contractors by officials of Federal Ministries of Finance and Accountant General's Office in the past 3 years to identify the perpetrators and recommend appropriate sanctions and report within 4 weeks for further legislative action. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Any seconder? Honorable Stanley.
Of our time. Abdul Ghani Adile Ayuba is my name. I speak for and on behalf of Alimosho Federal Constituency, the most populated federal constituency in the country. Mr. Speaker, with the leave of this distinguished House, I rise to move this important motion that rests solely on the need to investigate the budget expenses and activities of all Nigeria Research Institute from 2010 to date. Mr. Speaker, the House notes that over 65 Nigeria Research Institutes were established with the core mandate of conducting research in various fields of knowledge for scientific, social, and economic development of this country. The House also noted that in carrying out their core mandates, funds were proposed by these research institutes annually in the national budget to carry out their obligation efficiently and effectively. Aware that over the years, the National Assembly, in exercise of its constitutional duties, approved billions of naira to this research institute to conduct research to advance the technological, social, and economic development of the nation. Mr. Speaker, the House concerned that notwithstanding the huge amount of money budgeted in the various appropriation acts and released to this research institute, there is little evidence to support the substantial amount released for their researches. The House also concerned that the core mandate of this research institute may not be achieved and the nation's scarce resources may continue to go down the drain. The House taking cognizance of the need to investigate the activities of this research institute, vis-a-vis 1, the budgetary releases from 2010 to date and their implementation for the purpose of which the money were budgeted for. 2, the outcome of the research and feasible impact of the technological, social, and economic development of the nation. The House hereby resolved to mandate the Committee on Science Research Institute, Science Technology, Science Engineering, and National Agencies for Science and Engineering, NASA, to investigate the activity of the Research Institute, vis-a-vis budget releases from 2010 to date, their utilization and research outcome, to determine the level of their compliance in achieving their core mandates. Mr. Speaker, I hereby move. Thank you for this rare opportunity.
Where we have the best performing governor, Professor Sachuku Masoludo. Mr. Speaker, I have a motion calling on the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, to pay off all outstanding contract debts to contractors that have completed their contract within the commission. The House notes that the Niger Delta Development Commission was established to ameliorate the standard of living of the people of the region due to ecological challenges faced as a result of exploration of oil minerals in the Niger Delta area. Also note that to improve the living standard of the people of the region, in provision of goods and services, also in provision of social infrastructure, the Commission engages the services of contractors which are from various parts of the country. Aware that most of these contractors take loans from banks using their property as collateral to execute those contracts with the hope of being paid at the completion of the contract. Also aware that where these payments are not met within the required period, those properties used as collateral are thereafter confiscated by banks. And this has been the fate of most contractors engaged by NDDC in the last 8 years or more. Concerned that most contractors that have been engaged by the Commission in the last 8 years have complained of non-payment of contract award even after completing their contract award. Also concerned that non-payment have left most of those contractors homeless, heavily burdened with debt, leading to untimely death of some contractors. Further concerned that this has brought a very negative reputation to the Commission and to Nigeria, being a commission established by the Act of the National Assembly of Nigeria. The House resolved, Mr. Speaker, to mandate the House Committee on NDDC to investigate the matter with a view of identifying the contractors, determine the total outstanding debt, recommend payment plan, and report back within 6 weeks for further legislative actions. Mr. Speaker, I so move. Thank you.
My name is Mweke Felix Uche. I represent Eleme Tai, Oyibo Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, this is a very good motion. I'm sure that if NDDC has money, they will pay. But then, if you check the heading of the motion and the prayers, it does not go. The prayers shows that this should be an investigative motion. And at the same time, the heading is calling on Niger Delta Development Commission to pay off. You have arrived at a conclusion to pay off. And at the same time, you are mandating NDDC Committee of the House to investigate, verify, ascertain how much they are owing. I think that this motion should be withdrawn and recast properly, sir. Thank you.
So what are you amending?
My amendment change the heading.
Any seconder to that? I agree with you.
The prayers read. The House mandated the Committee on NDDC to investigate the matter. To investigate, one, with the view of identifying the contractors. When they investigate, they identify the contractors and those people that were owed, that were being owed since 8 years. Then determine the outstanding contract debt. To determine the debt, the amount that were being owed. And then recommend payment plan.
Honorable Pascal, read it again.
Okay.
Read it again.
Okay.
You said to investigate the non-payment of the outstanding contracts.
House mandate the Committee on NDDC to investigate the matter with a view of identifying the contractors.
Where is it written like that? That's not what I have here. Read what is on the other paper.
mandate the committee on NDDC, National Development Commission, to investigate. Okay, no, the prayer.
We are relying on what is on the order paper, not what you have personally.
Okay,
do you now understand why he is making that case?
I have to amend the prayer, Mr. Speaker.
So he is amending it now.
Okay.
For you.
Okay. The people that typed it, that is not from.
Well, that is not what you should be telling us here. It's what is on the order paper that you also are also supposed to read, not what you have on your personal documents. So anyone to second the amendment raised? Honorable Martins.
Thank you. I represent the people of Oron, Mbu, Okobo, Udunko, Urefa Orugo Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, I'm from Akwa Ibom State. Mr. Speaker, mine is not to second. It is clear that there's a disjoint between the title of this motion and the prayers of the motion. So I want to move that this motion be stepped down pending a proper reconciliation of the title of the motion and the prayers of the motion. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues,
you cannot raise another prayer or amendment when there is an existing one that has not been seconded. Anyone who is willing to second the first amendment, 61,358,925 naira only is for statutory transfers. 14,342,142,689,548 naira only is for the debt service. 13,064,9,682,673 naira only is for recurrent non-debt expenditure, while the sum of 23,963,251,624,250 naira only is for contribution to the development fund for capital expenditure for the year ending 31st December 2025. Standing in the name of Honorable Abubakar Kabir Abubakar. Honorable members will recall that the bill was read to the committee on Thursday, 19 December 2024. The report is ready for presentation. Therefore, Honorable Abubakar is hereby invited to present the report.
My name is Abubakar Kabir Bichi, member representing Bichi Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, I'm from Kano State. I rise to present the report of the Committee on Appropriation that the House do receive the report of the Committee on Appropriation on the bill of an act to authorize the issue from the consolidated revenue funds of the Federation the total sum of 54,990,165,355,396 naira, of which 3,641,358,925 naira only is for statutory transfers. 14,317,689,548 only is for debt service. 13,064,9,682,673 only is for recurrent non-debt expenditure, while the sum of 23,963,251,624,250 only is for contribution to the development funds for capital expenditure for the year ending on the 31st December 2025. Mr. Speaker, I so present.
Honorable Garwe.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, my very highly respected colleagues. My name is Right Honorable Igariwe Iduma Enwa. I represent Afikpo and Eda Federal Constituency, Mr. Speaker. I'm from Ebonyi State. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second this motion that we do receive this very important report. I so second.
Those in support of this motion should say aye. Those against should say nay. That is have it. Right, honorable colleagues, to continue with the consideration of the report of resume back. Okay. Honorable Jimmy, please. $990 billion, 165,355,396 naira only, which 3,645,761,358,925 naira only is for statutory transfers. 14,317,142,689,548 naira only is for debt service. 13,64,9,682,673 naira only is for recurrent non-debt expenditure. While the sum of 23,963,254,250 naira only is for contribution to the Development Fund for Capital Expenditure for the year ending 31st December 2025. Honorable members will recall that the report was laid on Thursday, 13 February 2025. Honorable Abubakar Bichi, the Chairman Appropriation, will move for its consideration.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, Honorable colleagues. Federal Constituency, Mr. Speaker, from Kano State. I rise to move that the House do consider the report of the Committee on Appropriation of the Bill of an Act to authorize the issue from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation the total sum of 54,990,165,355,396 naira, of which 3,645,761,358,925 naira only is for statutory transfers. 14,342,189,548 only is for debt service. 13,64,9,682,673 only is for recurrent non-debt expenditure, while the sum of 23,963,251,624,250,000 only is for contribution to the Development Fund for Capital Expenditure for the year ending on 31st December 2025. Mr. Speaker, I so move.
Chairman Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues. My name is James Abiodun. I represent the people of Ikeja Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second that this report for 2025 appropriation be read the second time. Thank you, sir.
Those in support of this motion should say aye. Those against, the ayes have it. Leader, can you move that the House resolve into the Committee of Supply?
Has to resolve to Committee of Supply to consider the report just presented. I so move.
I represent the good people of Njikoka and Ocha Federal Constituency. I arise to second the motion moved by our leader that this House resolve to Committee of Hope. I so move. So,
those in support of this motion. Are you okay? Honorable colleagues, the chairman Appropriation Committee is invited to give synopsis of this report for us to at least reflect before we start the main consideration. Chair, if you are ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable colleagues, my name is Abubakar Bichi, member representing Pittsburgh constituency. Mr. Speaker, I'm from Kano State. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, I hereby present the report of the Joint Committee on Appropriation of the 2025 Appropriation Bill. You may recall that on Wednesday, 18 December 2024, the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, laid before the joint sitting of the National Assembly the 2025 Appropriation Bill, tagged Budget of Restoration, Securing Peace and Building Prosperity, containing the budget estimate of the federal government revenue and expenditure for the 2025 fiscal year in accordance with Section 81, Subsection 1 of the 1999 Constitution as altered. The House debated the general principle of the bill on Thursday, 19 December 2024. The bill was read the second time and referred to the Committee on Appropriation for further legislative action. Thereafter, the committee reported the estimate of the various NDA to subcommittees that have jurisdiction over them in compliance with the Order 19, Subsection 5, Subsection A of the House Standing Order 2023 as altered. To fast-track work on the bill, the committee drew up a work plan and issued guidelines to subcommittees for further legislative action. Further to the issuance of the guidelines, the committee met with the chairman of its subcommittees on Monday, 6 January 2025, and give further brief on silent matters that will facilitate the completion of the legislative tasks within a reasonable time frame. Additionally, the committee held a one-day public hearing session on Thursday, 16 January 2025, to receive input from ministries, MDAs and agencies, civil societies organizations, captains of industries and development partners, etc. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, the summary of the 2025 Appropriation Bill is as follows. The initial proposal of the executive proposal was 49,740,165,355,396 naira only, is of which 4,435,761,358,925 naira only is for statutory transfers. 16,327,142,689,549 naira only is for debt service. 14,123,544,196 14,123,544,196,406 naira only is for recurrent non-debt expenditure, while the sum of 14,853,717,110,517 naira only is for contribution to the Development Fund for capital expenditure for the year ending on the 31st December 2025. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, while processing the bill, the Joint Committee on Appropriations met the President Economic Team, which includes the Coordinating Minister of the Economy and Minister of Finance, the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, the Minister of State Finance, the Director General Budget Office of the Federation, the Director General Debt Management Office, and the Accountant General of the Federation, to further discuss the revenue projection and expenditure of the 2025 Appropriation Bill. After the series of meetings held, the Committee on Finance, in conjunction with our committee, sourced additional revenue from the some revenue generating agencies detailed below. Government-owned enterprises, GOEs, 1,853,879,970,607 naira. Federal Inland Revenue Services, FIRS, 1,497,600,000,000, which federal government 52% share of the increase in revenue from 22.1 trillion to 25.1 trillion after the deduction of cost of collection. While Nigerian Customs Service, NCS, 1,209,000,000,000, which share of the increase in revenue from 6.5 trillion to 9.0 trillion after the deduction of cost of collection. The total sum of 4,530,479,607 additional revenue realized from the above effort was communicated to the executive, who applied the funds to address critical challenge and advance the government development as follows. Solid mineral sectors, 1 trillion only. Recapitalization of the Bank of Agriculture, BOA, 1.5 trillion only. Recapitalization of the Bank of Industry, BOI, 500 billion naira only. Critical infrastructure projects, RHID funds, 1.5 trillion only to cater for irrigation development through River Basin Development Authority, 380 billion. Transportation infrastructure, road and rail, 700 billion, which 300 billion for construction and rehabilitation of critical roads, while 400 billion for light rail network development in urban centers. While border communities also got the sum of 50 billion. Military barracks accommodation got the sum of 250 billion naira only, while military aviation, 120 billion naira only. The Joint Committee also discussed the issue arising from excess of the detail of the budget over the bill to the tune of 270 billion. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleague, the highlight of the 2025 budget estimate is as follows. Aggregate expenditure, 54 trillion, 990 billion, 165 million, 355,396 naira. Statutory transfers, 3 trillion, 645 billion, 761 million, 358,925. Recurrent expenditure, 13 trillion, 64 billion, 9 million, 682,673. Capital expenditure, 23 trillion, 963 billion, 251 million, 624,250 naira. Debt servicing, 14 trillion, 317 billion, 142 million, 681,548. While fiscal deficit, 13.08 trillion. Deficit GDP 1.52%. It is also to note that the recent action by the United States government to suspend further intervention in the Nigerian health sector through provision of vaccines and drugs of malaria, polio, HIV, and tuberculosis, using its agency, you said, will have adverse effect of Nigerians affected by such diseases. On this note, the President proactively made a new provision of the sum of $200 million, which is equivalent to 300 billion naira, in the service-wide board to fill the gap created by the United States government suspension of intervention to the Nigerian health sector. To proactively address the above-mentioned health challenge, which are currently being suffered by countries like Uganda and others. Similarly, some critical agencies of government forwarded genuine requests to Mr. President for additional funding. After a thorough examination by the Joint Appropriation Committees, additional funds were provided to the agencies, which include Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, NFIU, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, Independent Corrupt Practice and Other Offense Commission, ICPC, National Judicial Council, NJC, National Drug Law Enforcement Agencies, NDLEA, Department of State Service, DSS, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Armed Forces, among others. The budget size was increased by 700 billion to cater for the following: 270 billion differential between the detail of the budget and the bill. The provision of $200 million, which is equivalent to 300 billion for procurement of vaccine and drugs, and some agencies of government will provide funds to take care of their critical needs. The Joint Committee worked harmoniously with the leadership of the National Assembly and the executive arm of government in processing of the bill. This ensured a maximum collaboration of the two arms in the utilization of the additional revenue projection to improve the funding of some critical projects which could not be adequately funded in the budget process earlier submitted by Mr. President due to funding constraints. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, observations. The 2025 appropriation bill was presented late, comparison with the 2024 appropriation bill. It was observed that there was an upward review of the budget from 49.7 trillion to 54.9 trillion to cater for the difference between the details and the bill, the procurement of vaccines, and the additional funding in some of agencies of government. Recommendations. The committee hereby recommends that the executive presents the budget to the National Assembly not later than 3 months before the next financial year. This will help return the country to the January to December budget cycle. Having worked the harmony with the House of Representatives Committee on Appropriation, to the Senate Committee on Appropriation, and subcommittees of the two chambers, the House do consider and approve a bill of an act to authorize the issue from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation the total sum of 54 trillion 990 billion 165 million 355,396 naira only, of which 3,645,358,925 naira only is for statutory transfers. 14,317,142,689,548 naira is only for debt service, while 13,064,9,692,673 naira only is for recurrent non-debt expenditure, while the sum of 23,963,251,624,250 naira is only for contribution to the development fund for the capital expenditure for the year ending on the 31st day of December 2025, with accompanying schedule as detailed. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, in conclusion, on behalf of the committee, I wish to thank the President of the Senate. I wish to thank Mr. Speaker and the President of the Senate to the support to the committee. I also wish to thank the Appropriation Subcommittee for their cooperation in making the budget enactment process robust and effective. This has contributed significantly in making the report with a record time. Lastly, I thank the honorable colleagues and the staff of our Appropriation Committee who worked tirelessly to ensure successful completion of the legislative assignment. Mr. Speaker, I so submit.
Thank you, Chair. A detail of the reports from the Joint Committee of Appropriation of the House and the Senate. I think without any waste of time, we can proceed now and consider this report. And we start with number 1, issue an appropriation of 54,990,165,355,396 naira from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation for 2025. Carried. And in so doing, the Accountant General of the Federation shall, when authorized to do so by warrants signed by the Minister charged with responsibility for finance, pay out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation during the year ending on the 31st day of December 2025, the sums specified by the warrants, not exceeding in the aggregate 54,990,165,355,396 naira only for the year ending 31st day of December 2025. Carried. Fourth schedule, the amount mentioned in subsection 1 of this section shall be appropriated I thought you want the details. This is an important event, and I think we deserve to at least get the highlights.
Order, House, order, please. Order, please.
Order. Permission, let us take the major ones, and then the rest we can probably just take the main summaries. The first schedule, the amount mentioned in subsection 1 of this section shall be appropriated to heads of expenditure as indicated in the schedule to this bill. Carried. No part of amount aforesaid shall be released from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation after the end of the year mentioned in subsection 1 of this section. Carried. Release of funds from the Consolidated Revenue. All amounts appropriated under this bill shall be released from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation only for the purpose specified in the schedule to this bill. Carried?
Carried.
Vehement. In the event that the implementation of any of the projects intended to be undertaken under this bill cannot be completed without vehement, such vehement shall only be effected with the prior approval of the National Assembly. Carried. Corrigendum. any error in the schedule to this bill that may hinder the implementation of projects and programs in ministries, departments, and agencies may be corrected through a corrigendum issued by the National Assembly in any of the following circumstances. A, if the total sum of the project or program is not affected. Carried? Where the projects or programs are domiciled in ministries, departments, and agencies that lack jurisdiction to execute such projects. Carried? Where the execution of projects or programs by ministries, departments, and agencies are overtaken by event. Carried? Where projects are wrongly costed, cited, or posted to ministries, departments, or agencies. Carried? Excess revenue. The Accountant General of the Federation shall immediately upon the coming into force of this bill maintain a separate record for the documentation of revenue accruing to the Consolidated Revenue Fund in excess of oil price benchmark adopted in this budget. Carried? Such revenues as specified in subsection 1 of this section refers to revenues accruing from sales of government crude oil in excess of the approved benchmark price per barrel, the petroleum profit tax and royalty on oil and gas. Carried? Authorization. No funds shall be paid out of the monies arising from the record specified in section 5 subsection 1 except by an act or approval of the National Assembly. Carried? The Accountant General of the Federation shall forward to the National Assembly full details of funds released to the government agencies immediately with such funds are released. Carried? Information on funds releases. The Minister of Finance shall ensure that funds appropriated under this act are released to the appropriate agencies and or organs of government as and when due, provided that no funds for any quarter of the fiscal year shall be deferred without prior waiver from the National Assembly. Carried? Due process certification. The Department of Government charged with the responsibility of certifying that due processes have been complied with in the processing of implementation of projects shall ensure that all processes of approval are completed within the specified period as provided for in the Public Procurement Act. Carried? Information on internally generated revenue, domestic and foreign assistance. All accounting officers of ministries, parastatals, and departments of government who control heads of expenditures shall, upon the coming into effect of this bill, furnish the National Assembly on quarterly basis with detailed information on 1, the internally generated revenue of the agency in any form, and 2, all foreign and domestic assistance received from any agency, person, or organization in any form. Carried? Power of Nigerian embassies and missions. The missions and embassies shall constitute their tenders board as in a parastatal tenders board within the requisite threshold in compliance with the extant executive circular and the provisions of the Public Procurement Act. Carried? Detailed estimate. The detailed estimates of expenditure are set out in the second schedule to this bill. Carried? Expiry, Constitution 1999. In line with the provisions of Section 318 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, this bill expires after 12 months, starting from 1st day of January to 31st day of December 2025 when assented to. Carried? Short title. This bill may be cited as the Appropriation Bill 2025. Carried? Honorable colleagues, so we now go into the major. Schedule of revenues. Part A, Federal government shares of gross federation revenues. You have the figures with you. Carried. Part B, deductions. Carried. Part C, federal government share of net federation revenues. Carried. Part D, independent revenues. Carried. Part E, other dividends. That's less NLNG dividend captured in gross federation revenues. Carried. Aids and grants on Part 5. Carried. Part G, special funds and account receipts. Carried. Government-owned enterprises, that's net of operating surplus. Carried. Others on Part 1. Carried. Aggregate revenue / inflow expenditures. Carried. And they are statutory transfers. Carried. Debt service and sinking fund. Carried. Recurrent non-debt expenditure. Carried. Capital expenditure, Part M. Carried. Surplus from deficit. Carried. Financing items, debt financing, asset sales and privatization, which is contained on Part O. Asset sales and privatization. Carried. Part P, multilateral and bilateral projects tied loans. Carried. We go to aggregate financing items. Schedule Part A, which is federal government share of gross federation revenues. Share of federation revenues. Number 1, federal government share of main pool. Carried. Federal government share of VAT pool. Carried. Federal government share of EMTL. Carried. Total share of federation revenues. Carried. We go to Part B, deductions. Under deductions, we have oil and gas deductions. Carried. Non-oil deductions, cost of collection. Carried. Transfer to FCT, ecological stabilization and natural resources funds. Carried. Total deductions. Carried. We go to Part C, federal government share of net federation revenues. And in this regard, federal government share of net federation revenues. Number 7, which is federal government share of main pool. Carried. Federal government share of VAT pool. Carried. Federal government share of EMTL. Carried. Total share of federation revenues. Carried. We go to Part D, independent revenues. Under it, we have tax revenues as reflected under Head 10. Tax revenues. Carried. Non-tax revenues. Carried. Operation surplus. Carried. Total independent revenues. Carried. We go to Schedule Part E, other dividends. NLNG. Carried. Bank of Industry. Carried. Development Bank of Nigeria. Carried. Bank of Agriculture. Carried. Galaxy Backbone. Carried. Total dividends. Carried. We go to Schedule Part F, aids and grants. And under aids and grants, we have foreign aid and grants in cash. Carried. Total aids and grants. Carried. We go to Schedule Part G, special levies, accounts and transfers to CRF/CDF. And under it, we have special levies, accounts, transfers to CRF and CDF, special accounts. Carried. Total special levies and accounts. Carried. Schedule Part H, government-owned enterprises. Under it, we have government-owned enterprises. Carried. We have government operating surplus, which is equivalent to 80% of what is captured in independent revenue. Carried. Total government revenues, net of operating surplus. Carried. We go to Schedule Part I, Others, and under Others we have Education Tax, that's State Fund, carried. Signature Bonus for renewals, carried. Signature bonus, share of oil price royalty, carried. Recoveries, assets and fines, carried. Total, Others, carried. Schedule Part J, statutory transfers. We have National Judicial Council, carried. Niger Delta Development Commission, carried. Southeast Development Commission, carried. Northwest Development Commission, carried. Southwest Development Commission, carried. South Development Commission, carried. North Central Development Commission, carried. Universal Basic Education Commission, carried. National Assembly, carried. Public Complaint Commission, carried. Independent National Electoral Commission, carried. National Human Rights Commission, carried. Northeast Development Commission, carried. Basic Healthcare Provision Fund, carried. National Agency for Science and Engineering, NASENI, carried. Total statutory transfers, carried. We go to Schedule Part K, Debt Service. Under debt service, we have domestic debts, including ways and means, carried. Foreign debts, carried. Subtotal, carried. Sinking fund, under sinking fund, we have sinking fund to retire maturing promissory notes, carried. Subtotal, carried. Total debt service, carried. We go to Schedule Part L, recurrent and non-expenditure. Under it, non-debt, ministry, department, and agency. Executive, presidency, carried. Ministry of Defense, carried. Ministry of Foreign Affairs, carried. Are you sure that we don't want to revisit defense? It appears that the amount here is over-bloated. Oh, carried. Thank you. I just wanted to know if we consent to it or not. Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation, carried. Federal Ministry of Art, Culture and Creative Economy, carried. Federal Ministry of Tourism, carried. Ministry of Interior, carried. Office of the Head of Civil Service of the Federation, carried. Office of the Auditor General of the Federation, carried. Ministry of Police Affairs, carried. Federal Ministry of Communication, Innovation and Digital Economy, carried. National Security Advisor, carried. Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission, carried. Secretary to the Government of the Federation, carried. Federal Ministry of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs, carried. Federal Ministry of Livestock, carried. Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, carried. Federal Ministry of Finance, carried. Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, carried. Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, carried. Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment, carried. Federal Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, carried. Federal Ministry of Transportation, carried. Federal Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy, carried. Federal Ministry of Aviation and Aerospace, carried. Federal Ministry of Power, carried. Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources, carried. Federal Ministry of Steel Development, carried. Federal Ministry of Solid Minerals Development, carried. Federal Ministry of Works, carried. Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, carried. National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission, carried. Fiscal Responsibility Commission, carried. Federal Ministry of Water Resources and Sanitation. Are we sure? No review? We have an option to review now. Downward. Carried? Federal Ministry of Justice, carried. Independent Corrupt Practices and Related Offences Commission, carried. Federal Capital Territory Administration, carried. Federal Ministry of Niger Delta Development, carried. Federal Ministry of Youth, carried. Federal Ministry of Sports Development, carried. Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, carried. Federal Ministry of Education, carried. Federal Ministry of Health and Social Welfare, carried. Federal Ministry of Environment, carried. National Population Commission, carried. Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, carried. Subtotal Executive, carried. Federal Executive Bodies, starting with Code of Conduct Bureau, carried. Code of Conduct Tribunal, carried. Federal Character Commission, carried. Federal Civil Service Commission, carried. Police Service Commission, carried. Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, carried. Subtotal Federal Executive Bodies, carried. Government-owned enterprises, recurrent, carried. Third Fund, recurrent, carried. Schedule for pension, gratuities, and retirees benefits, total allocation, carried. Office of the Head of Service, Civil Service, civilian pension, carried. Pensions, carried. Pension running costs, carried. Unfunded liabilities, carried. Pension increment areas for 2024, carried. We go to military pensions and gratuities. Under it, we have pension and gratuities, carried. Expected retirees, carried. Death benefits, carried. Administrative charges, carried. Pension running costs, carried. Medical retirees, carried. Arrears of gratuities, January 2019 to December 2021, carried. Arrears of pensions, January 2019 to December 2021, carried. Arrears of death benefits, carried. Verification exercise, carried. Security Department allowance, including arrears for 2017, 2018, and 2019, carried. NHIS military retirees, carried. DIA civilian staff pension and gratuities, carried. Pension, carried. Gratuity, administrative charges, arrears of pension, minimum wage, and consequential adjustment, carried. Department of State Security, carried. Pensions including arrears, carried. Pension running costs, carried. Verification exercise, carried. Arrears of pension, minimum wage adjustment, August to December 2024, carried. Minimum wage adjustment for 2025, carried.
Carried.
We go to Nigerian Intelligence Agency. Pensions and dependents benefits, carried.
Carried.
Pension running costs, carried. Gratuity / long service severance package, carried. Arrears of pension, minimum wage adjustment, carried. Arrears of gratuity, minimum wage adjustment, carried. Pension Transitional Arrangement Directorate, which has 28 billion, carried. Defunct privatized agencies pension, carried. Pension increment arrears January to December 2024, carried. Pension running costs, carried. Unfunded liabilities, carried. We go to police pension gratuities, carried. Pensions, carried. Pension running costs, carried. Pension increment, carried. Customs and Immigration and Prisons Pension Office, carried. Pensions, carried. Pension running costs, carried. Pension for retired CGs and DCGs, carried. Pension increment arrears for 2024, carried. Universities pensions, including arrears, carried. Pensions, carried. Parastatals pensions and railway pensions, carried. Pensions carried. Schedule on NELMCOM carried. NELMCOM pensions and arrears carried. Pension running costs carried. National Pensions Commission. Arrears of pensions, National Pension Commissions carried. Arrears of pension liabilities beginning with payment into redemption fund carried. Pension protection fund carried. Increase in pension carried. Benefits of retired professors carried. Other pensions carried. Benefits of retired heads of service and permanent secretaries carried. Severance benefits to retired heads of government, agencies, and parastatals carried. Entitlements of former presidents, heads of states, and vice presidents and chief of general staff carried. Other service-wide votes carried. Payment of outstanding debt benefit to civil servants carried. Payment of outstanding debt benefit to police carried. Group life insurance for all MDAs, including DSS, corpus, plus administration and monitoring carried. Insurance of FGN sensitive assets carried. Payment for promotion and salary arrears carried. Minimum wage related adjustments carried. Military operations, Lafia, Dole, and other operations of the armed forces carried. Settlement of MDA's electricity bills debt carried. IPPIS capturing and monitoring carried. Margin for increases in cost and recurrent adjustment cost carried. Presidential amnesty program reintegration of transformed ex-militants carried. Service-wide vote, service-wide training of budget and planning officers on GIFMI's budget preparation system, as well as monitoring and evaluation of all projects nationwide carried. National Social Investment Program Agency recurrent carried. Contingency recurrent carried. International sporting competitions carried. TSA operations carried. Employee Compensation Act, Employees Compensation Fund carried. Contribution to international organizations carried. Gavi immunization carried. Malaria vaccination of infants carried. Vaccines and devices tracking system carried. Police operations fund carried. Are you sure? Carried? Mikey? Carried? Carried. Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps Special Operation Funds carried. National Poverty Reduction with Growth Strategy carried. Provision for core members, NHIS carried. Provision for core members, National Social Insurance Trust Fund carried. Presidential Policy and Coordination Office carried. National Homegrown School Feeding Program carried. Presidential Revenue Monitoring and Reconciliation Committee carried. Total CRF charges carried. Total recurrent non-debt carried. Schedule Part M, capital expenditure. Ministry, department, and agency. Presidency carried. Ministry of Defense carried. Are we sure? Are we seeing the figure there? Carried. Ministry of Foreign Affairs carried. Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation carried. Ministry of Art, Culture, and Creative Economy carried. Federal Ministry of Tourism carried. Ministry of Interior carried. Office of the Head of Service, Civil Service of the Federation carried. Auditor General for the Federation carried. Ministry of Police Affairs carried. Federal Ministry of Communication, Innovation, and Digital Economy carried. National Security Advisor carried. Observation. What?
Number one, the National Security Advisor. 179.
191.
179.
179 is Presidential Revenue Monitoring.
It's 191.
What I have is 170.
Oh, really? But I hope the figures are rhyming.
No, I'm not even talking about figures. I'm talking about the description. When you say National Security Advisor, it's as if it is personal.
That is it.
It should be the
Office of the National Security Advisor.
Yes,
Can
sir.
we correct that, please? Office of the National Security Advisor. Thank you for the observation. $191, right? One what? What is that one? Well, by my own is numbered like that, but since the figures are the same, the titles are the same, we can take them as they are. Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission carried. Secretary to the Government of the Federation carried. Federal Ministry of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs carried.
Mr. Speaker, observation. The same thing applied to the Secretary to the Government of the Federation.
Office, can we correct?
Office.
Office of the Secretary. Okay? Please make the correction. Federal Ministry of Livestock carried.
Mr. Speaker, sir.
Yep.
The same thing applies to the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation.
Please, let's make the correction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Let's make the same correction there, please. Federal Ministry of Livestock carried. Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security carried. Federal Ministry of Finance carried. Are you sure? Is it not too much? How many staff do they have?
Observation.
Carried. Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning carried. Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment carried. Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment carried. Federal Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology carried. Federal Ministry of Transportation carried. Federal Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy carried. Federal Ministry of Aviation and Aerospace carried. Federal Ministry of Power carried. Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources carried. Federal Ministry of Steel Development carried. Federal Ministry of Solid Minerals Development carried. Federal Ministry of Works. Again, should we suspend this one?
Increase it, sir.
And do an executive session first. Should we go ahead, honorable colleagues?
Observation, sir.
Observation. What is it? Shetima.
Yes, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, honorable colleagues, Mr. Chairman, sir, I have observation on the solid minerals. That is the Ministry of Solid Minerals Development. On my own report is 196. Mr. Speaker,
you have 196 in your own?
Yes, sir.
Are you sure you are looking at the capital component?
That's the capital component, sir. You are reading, I'm following you. The serial number.
Is that what you have there?
Differs from your own, sir. So my observation is the issue of this.
You are talking about?
About the figure, sir.
The serialization.
Yes, sir. The figure, sir.
What is the figure?
You know, we may recall when we got the additional revenue for 4 trillion, 4.something trillion. They said that the 1 trillion was for solid minerals development.
Yeah.
So it has not been reflected here. That's what I want clarification.
Chair Appropriation, can you shed light
Yes, sir.
on that? Thank you, Honorable Shetima.
1 trillion. Yeah.
Okay. Are you satisfied? Okay, so we make progress. Federal Ministry of Solid Minerals Development carried. Federal Ministry of Works carried. Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development carried. National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission carried. Fiscal Responsibility Commission carried. Federal Ministry of Water Resources and Sanitation carried. Federal Ministry of Justice carried. Independent Corrupt Practices and Related Offenses Commission carried. Federal Capital Territory Administration carried. Federal Ministry of Niger Delta Development carried. Federal Ministry of Youth
Observation, sir.
Pardon?
Observation.
Which one?
Ministry of Regional Development.
Oh, can we make the correction? Federal Ministry of Regional Development? Yes, very good observation. Otherwise, they could lose the whole entire budget if the name is not correctly mentioned. Thank you for that good observation. Federal Ministry of Youth, carried. Federal Ministry of Sport Development, carried.
Observation, sir.
Yes.
No Ministry of Sport.
We don't have Ministry of Sport anymore. It's National Sport Commission, sir.
That is true again. Very true. Can we make the correction, please? National Sports Commission instead of Federal Ministry of Sports Development. Thank you for the observation. Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, carried. Yes.
Money should be added, it's too small.
At this hour.
You just observe it, put it down.
The only place where we can take this money and add to women affairs is drugs.
Well, next time we're talking about
drugs and narcotics. If, Madam, you will accept, we take from the budget of your ministry and add to women affairs for the time being. Agreed? Yours is noted. I'm sure during subsequent budgets, we will try to see what we can do to improve. Federal Ministry of Education, carried. Federal Ministry of Health and Social Welfare, carried. Federal Ministry of Environment, carried. National Population Commission, carried. Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, carried. Subtotal Executive, carried. Code of Conduct Bureau, carried. Code of Conduct Tribunal, carried. Federal Character Commission, carried. Federal Civil Service Commission, carried. Police Service Commission, carried. Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, carried. Subtotal Federal Executive Bodies, carried. Government-owned enterprises capital, carried. Third Fund capital, carried. Multilateral and bilateral loan-funded projects, beginning with Federal Ministry of Communication, Innovation and Digital Economy, carried. Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, carried. Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, carried. Federal Ministry of Education, carried. Federal Ministry of Environment, carried. Federal Capital Territory, carried. Federal Ministry of Finance, carried. Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, carried. Federal Ministry of Budget of Health and Social Welfare, carried. Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, carried. Ministry of Interior, carried. Federal Ministry of Power, carried. Federal Ministry of Water Resources and Sanitation, carried. Federal Ministry of Works, carried. Multilateral and bilateral loan funded, totaling 3.364 trillion, carried. FGN Special Intervention Program and Social Housing Family Homes, carried. National Youth Investment Fund, carried. Counterpart funding for donor-supported programs, carried. Payment of local contractors' debt and other liabilities, carried. Galaxy Backbone, carried. IPPS Capital, carried. OSAF SDGs, carried. Special projects, beginning with recapitalization of development finance institutions, carried. Zonal intervention projects, carried. Federal Government Staff Housing Loans Board, carried. Subscriptions to shares in international organizations, carried. National development plans, carried. Contingency capital, carried. Aid and grants funded projects, carried. Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, carried. Refund of borrowed funds from the Education Task Fund, Third Fund, carried. Transfer through IPADEC, carried. National Poverty Reduction with Growth Strategy federal government commitment, including NSIP, upscaling carried. Recapitalization of Ministry of Finance Incorporated, MOFI, carried. Federal government share of oil price royalty transferred to NSIA, carried. Give means capital, carried. Presidential Policy and Coordination Office, carried. Presidential Committee on Health Sector Reform, carried. National Social Investment Program Agency, carried. Consumer Credit Fund, carried. Infrastructure Project Preparation Fund, carried. Mortgage Development Promotion Fund, carried. Student Loan Scheme, carried. Office of the Presidential Advisor on Energy, carried. Clean Energy Transition Initiative Development of Local Infrastructure Conversion to CNG Electric Vehicles, etc., carried. Nigerian Intelligence Agency Hospital, carried. Federal Inland Revenue Service Building, carried. Take-off grant for Obasikiru Kayode Adetona School of Governance Studies, carried. Presidential Revenue Monitoring and Reconciliation Committee, carried. SDG Service-wide vote, carried. NAS Service-wide vote, carried. Renewed hope medical relief for HIV, TB, malaria, etc., carried. NHIA, yes, yep.
285, sir. Mr. Speaker, I think we should reject this a little bit by deleting renewed hope, because that's like a political slogan. We just leave it medical relief, which is the real purpose. No, I'm not being political, but it should be medical.
It is the name of a program. It is the name of a program. There is nothing wrong with it.
Mr. Speaker, this is our budget. If we have medical relief for HIV, TB, malaria, PVC,
it's the title of the program. When you remove it, you lose the whole essence. You understand?
The slogan should come.
It's not a slogan. It's the name of the program. And the president has the right to put any name.
It's not harmful if we just remove renewed hope. Mr. Speaker, you know that
I'm sure I don't want to humble you, my leader. Let's just maintain it and make progress. I beg you. Are you not in support, honorable colleagues?
Carried.
God bless you. God bless you.
No.
NHIA Catastrophic Health Insurance Fund, carried. Solid Mineral Sector, carried. Recapitalization of the Bank of Agriculture, carried. Critical Infrastructure Projects, total, carried. Irrigation Development for River Basin Development Authorities, carried. Transportation,
observation, sir.
Roads and rails, carried. Roads carried. Light rail carried. And the light rail includes Kano, carried.
Observation.
Ogun, carried.
Observation, sir.
Kaduna, carried.
Observation, Mr. Speaker.
Carried. What's the observation?
Observation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Right Honorable Comrade Chineduoga. Mr. Speaker, I want this item 281, light rail, Kano, Ogun, Lagos. Mr. Speaker, I'm from a zone, and none of the southeast and other zones are captured in this particular place. And this is a national budget. We have to look at it critically. It's not for a particular state, Mr. Speaker. A southeast needs to be included. That is my point of order, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable. Your observation is noted, and we'll bring it to the attention of...
Northeast has not been captured too.
I am sure in the course of the year there might...
Mr. Speaker, no other time. It is now. Let us do it now. Mr. Speaker, observation. They are already ongoing now.
Yours is noted, Honorable, and we'll bring it to the attention of Mr. President.
Order.
In the near future, we'll ensure that that balancing is done, okay? Please, let's make progress.
Order, please. Order, please.
Border communities infrastructure carried. Military barracks accommodation carried. Military
Event has already overtaken it.
Total capital supplementation carried. Total capital
Observation, Mr. Speaker. South for the rail. South.
Decorum, please. My highly esteemed colleagues, decorum, please. Let's maintain some kind of decorum, please.
Order, please. When I'm talking, you are not supposed to also be talking. You can only raise your voice and expect to be recognized. But it's not good when we are talking, you are also talking. It's very dishonorable to us. Please. I have made my own statement or remark concerning that particular observation. And what I said is that we will bring this to the attention of Mr. President. Likely there may be another supplementary within the year. If that kind of opportunity unfolds, we will make sure that this request is channeled. Okay?
Another observation, sir.
Thank you very much. What observation?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's still on item 282. Light rails, I think it didn't indicate anything, so it's an observation. Something has been omitted. 282.
Which one is that? 280?
No, 282. Light rails.
Light rails.
So no location, nothing. So no location, no designation, just light rails.
Light rail is a...
But all of them has money. Even that point has money again. Look at it.
It's a mistake.
But
all the ones under that one are the light rail provisions.
Look at it there.
The ones under it are the provisions, okay? Thank you.
Observation, Mr. Federal Constituency. My observation has to do with 267, Nigeria Intelligence Agency, NIA.
267.
267, sir. 267.
After this, we will not consider any other.
No. We are not. 267, sir.
Let me just give him the benefit. What is the problem?
Yes, the problem is the amount allocated for an hospital.
Pardon?
Amount allocated for an hospital for an agency. Well, no, it doesn't make sense, sir. For us to for the budget to appropriate 238 billion for an hospital for an agency, when we allocated 137 billion for renewable power state.
If you have that observation before we reach that number,
yes,
you should have raised.
I have been saying observation, sir. You didn't listen to us.
But we have already hit the gavel. And that means the House has taken a position on it.
It's okay.
So sorry about it, please. Leader.
Observation, Mr. Speaker.
And also to remind Mr. Speaker.
We omitted.
You didn't call it, yes, sir. You didn't mention it.
You didn't mention it.
And equally to lend my voice, Mr. Speaker, the exclusion of the Southeast in the rail and roads from that infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, is one about fairness and one with historical implications for unity and development of Nigeria. Mr. Speaker, I'm taking you by your words that maybe by the supplementary budget, the Southeast will be fully captured in the roads and rail infrastructures.
Yeah.
And any other zone that is excluded, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Observation, Mr.
Having concluded that assignment, I rise to move that the House do revert to plenary and to get a report on the Committee of Supply of Mr. Speaker. I so move.
Minority to proceed deliberations.
Order, please, order. Ahmed Jaha, go back to your seat, please.
Honorable mascots, please can you find your seat? Sardona. So
Golebe.
now we're waiting for you.
Golebe.
Honorable
Adodogwa.
Honorable colleagues, the House and Committee of Supply considered the report of the Committee on Appropriations on a bill for an act to authorize the issue from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation, the total sum of 54,990,165,355,396 naira only, of which 3,645,358,925 naira only is for statutory transfers, while 14,689,548 naira only is for debt service. The sum of 64,683,673 naira only is for recurrent non-debt expenditure, while the sum of 23,963,251,624,250 naira only is for contribution to the development fund for the capital expenditure for the year ending 31st December 2025. And in so doing, approved clauses 1 to 13, the schedules as amended, explanatory memorandum, and the long title of the bill. Leader of the House, can you move that the House adopt the report of this Committee of Supply?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to move that the House do adopt the report from the Committee of Supply as efficiently and effectively rendered by Mr. Speaker. I so move.
The Minority Leader, please can you second?
Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues, I rise to second the motion that the House do adopt the report as a working document of the Assembly. I so second.
Those in support of this motion should say aye. Those against should say nay. That is have it. Clerk. Minority Leader, 1 minute, please. Wait. Clerk.
Right Honourable Speaker, honourable members. A bill for an act to authorize the issue from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation the total sum of 54,990,165,355,396 naira only, of which 3,345,761,358,925 naira only is for statutory transfers. 14,317,142,689,548 naira naira 14,317,142,689,548 naira only is for debt service.
13,64,9,682,000.
Order, silence please.
Is for the current non-debt expenditure, while the sum of 23,251,624,250 naira only is for contribution to the development of fund for capital expenditure for the year ending on the 31st December 2025. Third reading.
Be read for the third time and passed. Leader, can you move for the House to suspend its relevant rules again to adopt the votes and proceedings of today? That is have it. The minority caucus is still reminding us about the meeting of all minority parties that is supposed to take place immediately after plenary. So please advise from here to move to conference room 028. That's the temporary chamber for that meeting. Announcer, minority leader. The message is for you people to give us a little more. We are still hungry, APC. Give us at least 10 to 20, and then we just keep quiet.
Majority party.
Maybe Orobuja will send you. Leader, please can you move for the adjournment?